What if a modern destroyer fought the Vikings? Not in some fantasy scenario, but imagine it actually happened. Imagine a naval warship from 2024 somehow slipped through time and found itself facing thousands of Viking warriors in a coordinated invasion fleet heading for England's coast. One ship, hundreds of longships. Medieval weapons against radar, missiles, and armor. Who would win? And more importantly, how? The year is 793. Summer in the North Sea is brutal and unforgiving. Fog rolls in, thick and fast. The wind changes without warning. Waves crash against wooden hulls. Into this chaotic mess sails one of the largest Viking raiding forces ever assembled. Hundreds of sleek longships cut through the water, their square sails catching the wind. Inside these vessels sit thousands of warriors, men hardened by years of raiding coastal settlements. Their leader, Jarl Erik the Relentless, commands them with an iron fist. His mission is simple but ambitious. Raid deep into England, sack the monasteries for their gold and silver, capture trade ships, and establish a foothold for future conquests. He believes nothing can stop them. The English have no real navy. Their coastal defenses are weak. Victory seems inevitable. But Jarl Erik doesn't know that something far stranger than any English warship is about to change everything. A modern U.S. Navy destroyer, the USS Emerson, has somehow appeared in the waters just beyond the Viking formation. It emerged from a temporal anomaly that science cannot yet explain. The ship's captain, Commander Sarah Chen, has no idea how this happened or how to get home. But she does know one thing. She's looking at what appears to be the largest invasion fleet she has ever seen, and they're heading straight for a coastline full of innocent civilians. The Emerson is a cutting-edge Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. It displaces 9,000 tons. It carries advanced radar systems that can track objects from over 100 miles away. It has a crew of 333 sailors trained in modern combat. Its arsenal includes guided missiles, advanced cannons, helicopters, and electronic warfare systems. The Vikings, by contrast, rely on bows, spears, shields, and sheer ferocity. On paper, this should be no contest. One ship versus an entire armada. But things are never that simple. Commander Chen calls an emergency meeting with her senior staff. The tactical officer lays out the brutal reality. The Emerson has enough missiles and ammunition for maybe a dozen major engagements before supplies run critically low. There are roughly 300 Viking longships in the formation. Even if the ship's weapons are infinitely more powerful than anything the Vikings possess, ammunition is finite. Every missile fired is one less missile available for later. Every shell used is a choice that cannot be undone. The engineers calculate fuel consumption. In full combat mode, engaging and maneuvering constantly, the Emerson can sustain operations for perhaps 3 days before fuel reserves become dangerously low. After that, the ship becomes vulnerable, slow, and eventually immobilized. The situation becomes clear. The Emerson cannot fight a traditional sustained naval battle. A direct confrontation with the entire Viking fleet would be suicide. Instead, Commander Chen realizes they must think differently. They must use speed, technology, and strategy to achieve something more subtle. Their goal cannot be to sink every Viking ship. Their goal must be to break the invasion before it even reaches land. And there are 3 ways to do this. First, they must deny the Vikings access to the coast. If they can scatter the fleet, delay it, and keep the ships from reaching landing zones, the mission fails. Second, they must disrupt the command structure. In medieval warfare, command and control is fragile. If officers are killed, if messenger ships are sunk, if the chain of command breaks down, the fleet loses cohesion. Confusion becomes the greatest weapon. Third, they must destroy supplies. A Viking invasion fleet depends on maintaining its provisions. Fresh water, salted meat, mead, spare sails, replacement oars, and ammunition for their limited siege weapons. If these supplies are destroyed, the fleet starves. The sea becomes their enemy. Storms become their executioner. With this strategy in mind, Commander Chen orders the Emerson to move to position under cover of darkness. The ship runs completely dark. No running lights, no radar emissions except for a narrow beam whisper mode that the Vikings could never detect. The fog is thick enough to provide cover. The Emerson moves like a ghost through the night, while the Viking fleet sleeps and sails on, unaware. At 0200 hours, the radar operators get a clear picture of the entire Viking formation. It's organized into 3 concentric rings. The outermost ring consists of scout ships and smaller vessels, used for reconnaissance and communication. The middle ring contains the main fighting force, warships packed with armed warriors. The innermost ring, the most heavily protected, contains the treasure ships and supply vessels that the entire invasion depends upon. Commander Chen gives the order. The Emerson accelerates silently toward the outermost ring of Viking ships. At 3 miles distance, the ship's guns come to life. The 5-inch gun mount swivels and fires. The shell hisses through the darkness and explodes above the deck of a Viking scout ship in an airburst pattern. Shrapnel rips through wood and flesh. Men scream. The blast is so bright and so loud that it seems to tear the very sky open. The Vikings have no idea what just happened. They fire their bows into the darkness, but their arrows fall short. They light torches and try to see their attacker, but the Emerson is already moving, repositioning, staying at a distance that their weapons cannot reach. Another shell fires. Another explosion. This time it's a communication ship carrying the messenger riders who relay orders between different sections of the fleet. The ship catches fire. Men abandon it, jumping into the cold water. For hours, throughout the night, the pattern repeats. The Emerson fires. The Vikings respond but cannot hit back, and the destroyer repositions. By dawn, the Viking fleet is in chaos. 17 ships have been sunk or severely damaged. Hundreds of men are dead or wounded. Supplies have been scattered, and the Vikings still have no idea what they are fighting. When daylight comes, Commander Chen faces a new problem. In darkness, the ship's superior speed and maneuverability made it nearly invisible. In daylight, the destroyer is visible to every pair of eyes in the Viking fleet. The tactical advantage of surprise is gone. The Emerson must now operate in full daylight against an enemy that has seen its shape and understands where it is located. This is when Commander Chen deploys the helicopter. The Emerson carries to Sikorsky SH-60 Seahawk helicopters, each equipped with advanced targeting systems, night vision capability, and a payload of Hellfire missiles. The helicopter launches from the flight deck and rises into the morning sky. To the Vikings, it must seem like a metallic bird descending from the heavens to rain fire upon them. The helicopter pilot, Lieutenant Marcus Hayes, has the navigation systems locked onto clusters of supply vessels that the radar has identified. He approaches at low altitude, using the remaining fog as cover. The Vikings spot him and immediately begin firing arrows and spears into the air. It is completely futile. The helicopter is moving faster than any projectile they can launch. It is operating at altitudes beyond the reach of their weapons. Lieutenant Hayes fires the first Hellfire missile. It streaks across the sky and impacts a supply ship directly. The missile punches through the wooden hull and detonates inside. The ship explodes in a massive fireball. Wooden splinters, the size of logs, are hurled into the air. Men on nearby ships are blown overboard by the concussive force. The helicopter swings around and fires again. Another supply ship erupts in flames. Food stores, water barrels, spare sails, all of it consumed in seconds. On the decks of the Viking ships, panic spreads like wildfire. Warriors point at the sky and shout. Some believe they are under attack by the gods themselves. Others think it is some kind of black magic sent by their enemies. Officers try to maintain order, but the fear is too strong. Men hide below deck. Some attempt to shoot arrows at the helicopter, but the missiles keep coming, and there is nothing they can do to stop it. The Emerson, meanwhile, has repositioned several miles away, staying beyond the range of any Viking weapon. The ship's captain continues to coordinate the airstrikes, directing the helicopter to the next cluster of supply vessels. Over the course of 6 hours, approximately 30 tons of supplies are destroyed. The Vikings lose nearly a quarter of their food stores and half of their spare sails. By midday, the helicopter returns to the ship for refueling and rearming. Lieutenant Hayes reports back to Commander Chen with a grim assessment. The Vikings are trying to reorganize. They are pulling their ships into tighter formations, attempting to create a unified defensive posture. They are also beginning to move more aggressively toward the English coast. Time is running out. If they reach land, the mission becomes exponentially more difficult. Commander Chen makes a critical decision. The destroyer must engage the main fleet directly. They cannot afford to let the Vikings reach the coast. They must force a confrontation while the enemy is still confused and demoralized from the night attacks and airstrikes. The Emerson accelerates toward the center of the Viking formation. Radar shows the position of the largest Viking warship, a massive vessel called the Ravensclaw, which serves as Jarl Erik's command ship. The destroyer's guns lock onto the target. This is the moment Jarl Erik has been waiting for. He finally sees the enemy warship. It is unlike anything he has ever encountered. It is sleek, dark gray, with strange metallic structures and no visible sail. It does not move the way any ship should move. It appears to have no oars, yet it cuts through the water at incredible speed. The Jarl roars a command. All Viking ships are to attack. They will surround the enemy vessel and overwhelm it with numbers. They will board it if they must. Thousands of warriors scream in unison. The Viking fleet surges forward. This is exactly what Commander Chen expected. She orders the Emerson to commence full combat operations. The 5-inch gun fires in rapid succession, sending shell after shell into the oncoming Viking vessels. Airbursts detonate above the decks, raining shrapnel across the wooden hulls. Masts splinter and collapse. Sails catch fire. Men scream as metal fragments tear through their bodies. But the Vikings do not stop. They are trained for battle. They understand that this is their moment. Despite the explosions, despite the death, they surge forward. The smaller, faster longships begin to close the distance. Some are now within bow range. Thousands of arrows fill the air, hissing through the sky toward the Emerson. Most of them bounce harmlessly off the steel hull or miss entirely. But a few find their way onto the ship's deck, embedding themselves in rubber fittings and wooden railings. To the Vikings, this is encouragement. They press forward even harder. Commander Chen now gives the order to deploy the close-in weapon system. The Phalanx CIWS is a rotary cannon that fires 20 mm depleted uranium rounds at a rate of 4,500 rounds per minute. It is designed to defend against incoming missiles and aircraft. Now it is being used against medieval warriors in wooden boats. The gun comes to life with a sound like tearing metal. A stream of tracer rounds reaches out toward the closest Viking ships. The effect is catastrophic. Wooden hulls are shredded like paper. Men caught in the line of fire are simply torn apart. Blood mists the decks. The Vikings scream in terror as entire sections of their ships are obliterated in seconds. Still, some continue to advance. A few Viking ships manage to close to within a few hundred meters of the destroyer. They attempt to grapple and board, throwing grappling hooks onto the Emerson's hull. Jarl Erik himself stands on the bow of the Ravensclaw, roaring defiance at the impossible enemy. This is when Commander Chen deploys the missiles. The Emerson carries Harpoon anti-ship missiles, weapons designed to sink modern steel warships from over 60 miles away. Against wooden Viking vessels, they are apocalyptically overkill. The first missile launches with a roar. It streaks across the water at near supersonic speed and impacts the Ravensclaw directly at the waterline. The explosion is so powerful that it lifts the entire ship out of the water. When it comes back down, it is already sinking. Jarl Erik, last seen shouting on the bow, is simply gone. The Vikings closest to the Ravensclaw watch their leader's ship disappear beneath the waves. The moment breaks them. The coordinated attack dissolves into chaos. Ships begin to turn away. Warriors abandon the idea of boarding and instead focus on survival. The Emerson pursues the fleeing Viking fleet for the next several hours, continuing to engage with missiles and gunfire. More ships sink. More warriors die. But eventually, as the sun begins to set, Commander Chen orders the pursuit to stop. The destroyer's ammunition is dangerously low. Its fuel reserves are barely adequate for returning to open ocean. The mission, however, has succeeded. The Viking invasion fleet has been broken. Of the original 300 ships, only 180 remain afloat. Many of those are damaged and barely seaworthy. The supply situation is critical. Thousands of warriors are dead, wounded, or drowning. Command and control has completely collapsed with the death of Jarl Erik. The few surviving Viking officers have one choice: retreat or face annihilation. They choose retreat. Within hours, the entire fleet is turning back toward Scandinavia, abandoning the invasion before it even reaches English shores. On the English coast, villagers and monks watch in amazement as the great Viking fleet that was supposed to devastate their lands simply disappears over the horizon. They have no idea what happened. They do not see the Emerson, which has already moved into open ocean to assess its damage and begin jury-rigging repairs. The legends that emerge from this event will confuse and perplex historians for centuries. The Vikings who survive will speak of a ghost ship, an iron dragon that moved without sails and wielded weapons that could destroy an entire vessel with a single blow. The English will tell stories of divine intervention, of God himself defending the realm against pagan invaders. Monks will record the event in their chronicles as a miracle, a sign from heaven that England was protected by forces beyond human understanding. But the truth is far stranger and far more profound. For one day, in 793, a crack appeared between two. Through that crack came the future, armed with technology that made medieval warfare obsolete. One ship, one crew, and one captain with the tactical brilliance to understand that overwhelming force is not always achieved through overwhelming numbers. Sometimes it is achieved through understanding, strategy, and the will to do what must be done. The USS Emerson would never find its way home. The temporal anomaly that brought it to the year 793 would never reopen. Commander Sarah Chen and her crew would spend the rest of their lives stranded in time, their modern warship gradually deteriorating as spare parts became impossible to manufacture. But in that single day, they changed the course of history. They stopped an invasion that might have devastated medieval England. They proved that one ship, one crew, and one person with the courage to lead them can change everything. And in the centuries to come, as the legend grew in the retelling, the Iron Dragon would become myth. Poets would write verses about it. Children would ask their parents if it was real. And somewhere in the mist of legend and history, the truth would fade, leaving only wonder and mystery in its wake.